Hey there, you awesome viewer. Let's imagine a little neighborhood together. It's super quiet, with nice green lawns and houses all in a row. People peek out their windows a lot because they're curious about everything. That's where I lived. My name's Jake Carter, and I'm just a regular guy. I had a small house with a big porch, and my truck was old and rusty. Everyone thought they knew me. They saw me as the quiet guy who didn't make trouble. But guess what? I had a secret, a huge one. Nobody had a clue about it, and it was going to shake things up big time. Before we jump into the story, I need your help. Drop a comment below and tell me where are you watching from today? Maybe your city or your room. And if you like stories where the little guy beats the big bully, hit that subscribe button right now. It's free, and it means we can hang out more. Here's a fun question for you to think about. Have you ever met someone who tried to boss you around, just because they didn't really know you? Maybe a kid at school or someone in your family. Well, hold on tight, because the story is going to get wild and exciting. Okay, let's go back to that day it all started. It was a bright, sunny Saturday. The sky was blue, and birds were chirping. I was sitting on my porch, feeling happy. I had a big glass of cold lemonade in my hand. The ice clinked when I took a sip, and it tasted sweet and sour, perfect for a warm day. I was just relaxing, watching the world go by, when I heard a loud noise. It was a big roar. I looked up, and there it was, a giant bulldozer rolling down the street. You know, those huge machines that knock stuff down? It was yellow and loud, and it made the ground shake a little. And guess who was standing next to it? Karen Mitchell. She was the boss of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. That's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your house can be painted. Karen thought she was the queen of everything. She walked around with her nose in the air, acting like she owned every single house. She had short hair, always wore bright red lipstick, and carried a big stack of papers everywhere she went. She loved yelling at people and telling them what to do. And that day, she was coming for me. Karen marched right up to my yard. Her shoes clicked on the pavement, and her voice was loud and sharp. "Jake," she shouted, pointing at my fence. "Your fence is 2 inches too tall. That's against the rules. I'm tearing it down right now." She waved her papers in the air like they were magic. The bulldozer growled behind her, ready to smash my fence to bits. My fence wasn't fancy, just some wooden boards I'd painted white to keep my yard cozy. I liked it a lot, but Karen? She hated it. Now, most people would get mad or scared. They might yell back or beg her to stop. But me? I didn't do that. I just sat there on my porch, sipping my lemonade. I looked at Karen with her angry face and her loud bulldozer, and I smiled. Yep, I smiled. Not a big goofy grin, but a little one, like I knew something she didn't. And I did. She was so busy shouting and bossing me around that she had no idea what was really going on. She thought I was just some guy she could push over, like a toy in the sandbox. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't even mad. I was calm, because I had a plan and a secret that was going to surprise everyone. Let me tell you a bit more about my neighborhood, so you can picture it. It was the kind of place where kids rode bikes after school and dogs barked at squirrels. The houses were small, with flowers in the yards and swings on porches. Everyone knew each other, but they also liked to gossip. If someone got a new car or planted a tree, the whole street would talk about it by dinner. And Karen? She was the loudest talker of all. She'd been in charge of the HOA forever, and she loved making rules. "No loud music," she'd say. "No parking here." She even told my neighbor, old Mr. Thompson, that his birdhouse was too ugly and had to go. Can you believe that? People didn't like Karen much, but they were afraid of her. She'd fine you money if you broke her rules, like $50 if your trash can stayed out too long. So most folks just nodded and did what she said. Me, though. I stayed quiet. I'd wave at her when she walked by, and I'd say, "Morning, Karen, real nice." She'd huff and keep going, thinking I was no big deal. And that's what made this so fun. She thought she had all the power, but she didn't know the truth about me. Back to that Saturday. The bulldozer was so close now I could feel the rumble in my chair. Karen stood there, hands on her hips, staring at me like I was a bug she wanted to squish. "What are you smiling at?" Jake, she snapped. This is serious. Your fence is illegal. The driver in the bulldozer looked at me, waiting for Karen's orders. Neighbors started peeking out their doors, watching the show. They probably felt bad for me, thinking, oh no, Jake's in trouble now. But I wasn't worried. I took another sip of my lemonade nice and slow and said, okay, Karen. Do what you gotta do. My voice was calm, like I was talking about the weather. She blinked, confused for a second, because I wasn't fighting back. Then she laughed, a mean little laugh, and turned to the bulldozer guy. Go ahead. Knock it down, she ordered. The machine roared louder, and the big metal scoop crashed into my fence. Crack. Wood flew everywhere, and dust puffed up in the air. My nice white fence was gone in seconds, just a pile of broken pieces on the grass. Karen clapped her hands like she'd won a prize. That's better, she said. Now this neighborhood looks right. She didn't even say sorry or ask if I was okay. She just turned and walked away, her papers flapping in the wind. The neighbors shook their heads and went back inside. The bulldozer drove off, leaving me with a messy yard and no fence. But I stayed on my porch, rocking in my chair. I finished my lemonade and set the glass down. If you'd looked at me right then, you'd see that little smile still on my face. Why? Because Karen thought she'd beat me. She thought she was the boss. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know my secret. And that secret? It was going to turn everything upside down. So, what do you think so far? Are you ready to find out what happens next? This story's just getting started, and trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. Stick with me, because Karen's about to learn a big lesson, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Okay, let's keep this story rolling. You've met me, Jake, and you've seen Karen start her trouble. Now, let's talk about how she kept making things worse and why I didn't let it get to me. Karen wasn't new to being bossy. Nope, she'd been acting like the queen of our neighborhood for years. She loved telling everyone what to do, like she was in charge of the whole world. She'd walk around with her big stack of papers, pointing at people's houses and yelling about rules. For example, she'd tell Mr. Thompson down the street, your grass is too tall. Mow it today, or I'll fine you. Poor Mr. Thompson would grab his old lawnmower and get to work, even though he could barely push it. Then there was Mrs. Lee, who parked her car in front of her own house. Karen didn't like that. Move it to the garage, she'd shout. That's the rule. Mrs. Lee would sigh and do it, just to keep Karen quiet. And don't even get me started on curtains. One time, she told my friend Sam his blue curtains were too ugly and had to be white. Can you believe that? Curtains. She acted like everything in the neighborhood had to look perfect, or she'd lose her mind. To Karen, I was just the quiet guy. The one who didn't talk much or make a fuss. She'd look at me with her mean little eyes and that smug grin like she was so much better than me. You're a nobody, Jake, she'd say, her voice all sharp and nasty. Follow the rules or get out of my neighborhood. Those words hurt, I won't lie. It's not fun when someone talks to you like you're nothing. But I didn't yell back. I didn't stomp my feet or cry. Nope. I just looked at her and nodded, like I was saying, okay, Karen, whatever you say. That day with the bulldozer? That was her big show. After she shouted about my fence being 2 inches too tall, she didn't wait for me to fix it. Oh no. She marched that big, loud bulldozer right up to my yard. The machine growled and puffed smoke, and the driver looked at her for the signal. She waved her hand like a queen giving an order. Tear it down, she barked. And just like that crash, the bulldozer smashed into my fence. The wood cracked and broke into little pieces. Dust flew up in a big cloud, and my nice white fence was gone. All that was left was a messy pile on the grass. Karen stood there, hands on her hips, laughing like she'd just won a huge game. That's how we do it, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. No more ugly fence. She didn't care that it was mine or that I liked it. To her, it was all about winning. My neighbors were watching from their windows, peeking out like scared little mice. I could almost hear them whispering to each other. Poor Jake, they'd say. He's got no chance against her. Karen always gets her way. But here's the thing they didn't know, and Karen didn't know either. I wasn't mad. Not even a little bit. Sure, her words stung, and seeing my fence smashed wasn't fun. But I didn't let it shake me up. Why? Because I was waiting. I had a secret, and I was keeping it close, like a treasure in my pocket. Every time Karen snapped at me, I didn't argue. I just watched her. Every time she bragged about her power, I listened. I tucked it all away in my mind, like saving coins in a jar. She thought she was the big shot, the one who could push me around and laugh about it. But I had something up my sleeve, something she'd never, ever guess. Let me tell you more about how Karen acted, so you get the picture. She wasn't just bossy that one day, she was like that all the time. A week before the bulldozer, she came to my door with her papers. "Jake," she said, "your mailbox is leaning a little. Fix it, or I'll fine you $20." My mailbox was fine, it just had a tiny wobble. But I said, "Sure, Karen," and nodded. She smirked and walked away, thinking she'd scared me. Then, a few days later, she complained about my truck. "It's too rusty," she yelled. "Park it somewhere else." I just smiled and said, "Okay, I'll think about it." She didn't like that I stayed so calm. It made her madder, I think. The neighbors saw all this, and they felt bad for me. Old Mr. Thompson even came over once with a plate of cookies. "Don't let her get to you, Jake," he said. "She's mean to everyone." I thanked him and ate the cookies. They were chocolate chip, my favorite. But I told him, "Don't worry about me, Mr. Thompson. I'm fine." He looked at me funny, like he didn't understand why I wasn't upset. And I wasn't. Karen could yell and stomp all she wanted. She could tear down my fence and wave her rules in my face. It didn't matter. I wasn't fighting her, not yet. See, Karen thought she knew everything. She thought I was weak because I didn't shout back. She'd laugh with her friends at the neighborhood meetings, saying stuff like, "Jake's too scared to stand up to me." Her friends would nod and giggle, sipping their fancy lemonade. They all believed she was unstoppable, like a superhero with her HOA powers. But they were wrong. I wasn't scared. I wasn't weak. I was waiting for the right moment, and it was coming closer every day. Every time she bossed me around, I paid attention. I watched how she acted, how she talked, how she thought she was so smart. It was like I was collecting clues in a game. She didn't know it, but she was giving me everything I needed. With every mean word and every smug grin, she was building her own trap. And me? I was the one holding the strings. She thought she was winning a war, but I was playing a different game, one she didn't even know about. So there I was, sitting on my porch after the bulldozer left. My fence was gone, and my yard looked like a mess. Karen had strutted off, happy as could be. The neighbors went back inside, probably thinking I'd given up. But I didn't move. I just rocked in my chair, looking at the broken wood. And that little smile. It was still on my face. Because I knew something big was coming. Karen thought she'd beaten me, but she had no idea what I had hidden up my sleeve. It was something so huge, it'd make her jaw drop, and I couldn't wait to see her face when it happened. All right, let's keep this story going. Things were heating up in my little neighborhood, and Karen was getting pushier every day. After she smashed my fence with that bulldozer, you'd think she'd chill out a bit. Nope. Days went by, and she just got bolder. She started coming to my house all the time, knocking on my door with loud bangs. Each time, she had a new complaint, something tiny she wanted to pick on me about. One morning, she showed up early. The sun was barely up, and I was still in my pajamas, eating cereal. Knock, knock, knock. There she was, standing on my porch with her arms crossed. "Jake," she said, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a kid. "Your mailbox is ugly. It's old and rusty. Fix it, or I'll make you pay a fine." I looked at my mailbox through the window. It was a little bent, sure, but it still worked fine. I didn't argue, though. I just nodded and said, "I'll fix it, Karen." She smirked like she always did, thinking she'd won. Then she turned around and strutted off, her shoes clicking on the sidewalk. A few days later, she was back. This time, it was about my grass. I was sitting on my porch, reading a comic book, when she marched up. "Jake," she yelled. "Your grass is too long. It's a mess." Cut it today, or I'll write you up. My grass wasn't even that bad, just a little taller than hers. But I didn't fight her. I smiled and said, "Okay, Karen, I'll get to it." She gave me that smug grin again, like she was the smartest person ever, and walked away. She thought she was beating me every time. But I wasn't just sitting there doing nothing, I was planning. See, while Karen kept bossing me around, I stayed calm on the outside. But inside my head, I was busy. I was thinking, watching, and figuring things out. Every time she came by with her mean words, I didn't get mad. I just tucked it away in my brain, like saving candy for later. She thought I was weak because I didn't yell back. She thought she could push me around forever. But I had a secret cooking, and it was getting better every day. Then came the neighborhood picnic. It was a sunny afternoon, and everyone was outside at the park down the street. There were tables with red checkered cloths, piles of food, and kids running around laughing. I was helping out, flipping burgers on the grill. The smell of sizzling meat filled the air, and smoke puffed up in little clouds. I wore my old baseball cap and a goofy apron that said Grill Master. People were chatting and eating, and it felt nice until Karen showed up. She didn't come to eat or have fun. Oh no. She came to talk loud and show off. I saw her standing by the lemonade table with her group of friends. They all had fancy drinks in their hands, pink lemonade with little umbrellas in the cups. Karen was waving her big stack of HOA papers around, like they were a prize. I could hear her from the grill, even over the sizzle of the burgers. "Jake's a pushover," she bragged, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He doesn't even fight back. I'll have him out of this neighborhood by next month." Her friends laughed, nodding like she was so clever. "Oh, Karen, you're the best," one of them said. They giggled and sipped their drinks, thinking she was unstoppable. I didn't say anything. I just kept flipping burgers, acting like I didn't hear. But I did hear every word. And I saw something too. Karen kept holding up those papers, flapping them in the air like a flag. She loved those papers. They were her rules, her power, her way of bossing everyone around. But here's the thing, I knew more about those papers than she did. Way more. And that was a little clue about my secret. While Karen was busy bragging, I was busy thinking. I'd been digging not with a shovel in the dirt, but with my brain. I'd been looking at stuff, reading things, and finding out secrets. Not big, loud secrets like in a superhero movie, but quiet ones hidden in old records at the library. You know those dusty books and files nobody looks at? I did. I went there a few times, sneaking in after Karen's visits. I'd sit at a table with a lamp, flipping through pages, looking for something special. And I found it, a little piece of info about our neighborhood that nobody else knew. Not even Karen. What was it? I'm not telling you yet. That's part of the fun, you've got to wait a little longer. But I'll give you a hint, it was something big, something that could change everything. And every time Karen pushed me, like with the mailbox or the grass or the fence, she was making things worse for herself. She didn't know it, but she was digging herself a deeper hole. Every mean word, every smirk, every time she laughed at me, it was like she was handing me another piece of my plan. She thought she was so smart, but I was smarter. I just didn't show it yet. Back at the picnic, I kept my cool. Karen finished her bragging and walked around, bossing other people. "Put that trash in the bin," she yelled at a kid. "No dogs allowed here," she told Mrs. Lee. Everyone groaned but did what she said. Me. I stayed by the grill, flipping burgers and smiling. A few neighbors came over for food. "You okay, Jake?" one asked. "Karen's being extra mean today." I nodded and handed him a burger. "I'm fine," I said. "Don't worry about me." They looked at me funny, like they didn't get why I wasn't mad. But I had my reasons. See, I wasn't just waiting for no reason. I was waiting for the perfect moment. Karen thought she could keep pushing me forever, telling me my mailbox was ugly, my grass was wrong, my fence was bad. She thought I'd give up and move away. But every time she came at me, I got stronger. Not with muscles, but with my secret. It was like building a tower, one block at a time. And Karen? She was helping me build it without even knowing. So there I was at the picnic, flipping burgers and listening to her brag. The sun was shining, the burgers were cooking, and Karen was laughing. She thought she had me beat. She thought I was a pushover, a nobody, a guy who'd run away soon. But I wasn't running. I was staying. And that stack of papers she loved so much. Those were going to be her big mistake. She didn't know it yet, but I did. And that made me smile just a little, quiet smile because the best part was still coming. Okay, friends, get ready, this is the best part of the story. Everything had been building up to this one huge day. It was the day of the HOA meeting, and Karen was ready to make me look bad in front of everyone. She'd been bossing me around for weeks, smashing my fence, yelling about my mailbox, complaining about my grass. Now, she wanted to finish me off. She called this big meeting just to put me in my place, like I was a naughty kid who needed a timeout. And boy, was she excited about it. The meeting was in the neighborhood clubhouse, a little building with wooden walls and long tables. It was packed with people. All my neighbors were there, sitting on chairs, whispering to each other. Kids were playing outside, but inside, it was serious. Everyone knew Karen was going to yell at me, and they came to watch the show. The room smelled like coffee and cookies, because someone brought snacks. But nobody was eating, they were too busy staring. Karen stood up front, right by a big whiteboard. She had her stack of HOA papers in her hands, and she was smirking like she'd already won. Her red lipstick was extra bright, and her eyes were shiny with excitement. She looked at me, sitting in the back, and pointed. "Jake's a disgrace to this neighborhood," she said, loud and mean. "He breaks every rule in the book. His fence was too tall, his mailbox is ugly, his grass is a mess. I moved to fine him $5,000 right now." She slammed her papers on the table, like a judge banging a hammer. Her friends clapped, and some neighbors nodded, thinking she was right. The room buzzed with whispers. $5,000, someone said. "That's a lot," another whispered. Everyone thought I was in big trouble. Karen crossed her arms and stared at me, waiting for me to cry or beg. She thought she had me trapped, like a mouse in a cage. But I didn't say a word, not yet. I just sat there, quiet, with my hands in my pockets. I'd been waiting for this moment, and it was finally here. Then, I stood up. Real slow, like I had all the time in the world. The room went quiet, super quiet. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, tick-tock, tick-tock. Every eye turned to me. Mr. Thompson stopped chewing his cookie. Mrs. Lee put down her coffee cup. Even the kids outside got quiet, like they knew something big was happening. I walked to the front, right past all the chairs, holding one single piece of paper. It wasn't fancy, just plain white with some writing on it. But it was the most important paper in the room. I stopped right in front of Karen. She was still smirking, but it was starting to wobble a little. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, loud and clear, "Karen, you might want to sit down for this." My voice wasn't shaky or scared, it was strong, like I meant business. Her smirk faded fast. She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her voice getting sharp. She didn't like that I wasn't scared. She didn't like that I was talking back. I held up the paper so everyone could see it. "This," I said, "is a deed." I paused for a second, letting that word sink in. Some people tilted their heads, like, "What's a deed?" So I explained, nice and simple. A deed is a paper that says who owns something. And this one? It says I don't just own my little house. I own the whole block. Every house, every yard, every blade of grass. I bought it all last year, real quiet, so nobody knew. And guess what, Karen? That means I own the HOA too. The room exploded with noise. People gasped like they'd seen a ghost. "What?" someone yelled. "No way," said another. Mr. Thompson dropped his cookie on the floor. Mrs. Lee's jaw fell open so wide you could see her teeth. Kids peeked through the windows, trying to hear. It was chaos, good chaos. Everyone was shocked, turning to their neighbors, whispering and pointing. They couldn't believe it. Quiet little Jake, the guy with the rusty truck, owned everything? Karen's face was the best part. First, it turned red like a tomato. She was mad, so mad she could hardly talk. Then, it went white, like all the color ran away. Her eyes got big, and her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. That's impossible, she finally yelled, stomping her foot. You're lying. You can't own all this. She grabbed her papers and waved them around, like they'd save her. But they couldn't. Her hands were shaking, and her voice was loud, but it sounded scared now, not mean. I didn't yell back. I just turned to the back of the room, where a man in a suit was sitting. He was a lawyer, someone who knows all about rules and papers. I'd asked him to come, just in case. I handed him the deed, nice and calm. Check it, I said. He took the paper, put on his glasses, and read it slow. The room got quiet again, waiting. Karen stared at him, breathing hard. Everyone else leaned forward in their chairs. The lawyer looked up and nodded. It's real, he said, simple as that. Jake Carter owns the whole block. It's all here, signed and legal. He held up the deed so people could see the fancy stamps on it. That was it, the proof. No one could argue with the lawyer. The room went wild again. People clapped and cheered. Wow, Jake. Mr. Thompson shouted. Good for you. Mrs. Lee said, smiling big. Some kids outside started jumping up and down, like it was a party. Karen. She just stood there, frozen. Her papers slipped out of her hands and fell on the floor, scattering everywhere. Her big plan to find me $5,000. Gone. Her power to boss everyone around? Gone. She looked small now, not like a queen anymore. I turned back to her, still calm. So, Karen, I said, I don't think you're finding me today. In fact, I don't think you're doing much of anything anymore. The neighbors laughed loud, happy laughs. Karen's face got red again, but she didn't say a word. She knew she'd lost. All her yelling, all her smirking, all her bulldozers, they didn't matter now. I'd been quiet for weeks, letting her think she was winning. But this was my moment, and it felt awesome. All right, friends, we're at the end of the big showdown. The HOA meeting was wild, and I just dropped the biggest surprise ever. I owned the whole block. Karen was standing there, her face all red and white, her papers all over the floor. She'd tried to find me $5,000, but my deed proved I was the real boss now. Let's see what happened next. It's the part where everything gets fixed, and justice wins. Karen wasn't ready to give up, even after the lawyer said my deed was real. She stomped her foot again, like a kid having a tantrum. This isn't fair, she yelled. You can't do this, Jake. I'm in charge here. Her voice was loud, but it sounded shaky now. She pointed at me, then at the lawyer, then at the neighbors, like she wanted someone to help her. But nobody did. The room was full of people clapping and smiling at me. Karen's friends, the ones who always laughed with her, just sat there quiet. They didn't know what to say. I stepped closer to her, still holding my deed. I didn't yell or get mad. I stayed calm, like always. Karen, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, it's over. I'm the owner now. And you know what? I'm dissolving the HOA. That's a big word, so let me explain. Dissolving means shutting it down, like closing a club forever. No more fines, I said. No more rules about fences or mailboxes or grass. And Karen? You're done bossing people around. The neighbors went crazy. They cheered so loud the windows shook. Yay, Jake, shouted Mr. Thompson, waving his cookie in the air. Finally, said Mrs. Lee, clapping her hands. Kids outside heard the noise and started cheering too, even though they didn't know why. It was like a party breaking out right there in the clubhouse. People were tired of Karen's mean rules, and now they were free. They looked at me like I was a hero, and it felt pretty cool. Karen didn't like that one bit. She huffed and puffed, her face getting redder. You can't do this, she yelled again. I'll fight you. I'll tell everyone you cheated. She was muttering threats, saying stuff like, I'll get a lawyer, or you'll be sorry. But nobody cared. The lawyer in the back just shook his head, holding my deed. It was real, and she couldn't change that. Karen grabbed her scattered papers off the floor, stuffing them into her bag. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard it made a big bang. Everyone watched her go, but no one followed. She was done, and we all knew it. After she left, the meeting turned into a celebration. People came up to me, shaking my hand. "Thanks, Jake," said Mr. Thompson. "You saved us." Mrs. Lee gave me a big smile and said, "No more silly rules, hooray." Even the kids ran inside, asking, "Is Karen gone? Can we play loud now?" I laughed and said, "Yep, play all you want." The room was full of happy chatter, and someone passed out the cookies. They were chocolate chip, my favorite. I took one and ate it, feeling proud. The neighborhood wasn't Karen's playground anymore, it was ours. A few days later, I decided to have some fun. Remember my old fence that Karen smashed? I built a new one. But this time, I made it twice as tall as the old one. Yep, it was super high, way taller than her rules ever allowed. I painted it bright blue, just because I could. No HOA meant no fines, no yelling, no nothing. I stood back and looked at it, grinning. It wasn't just a fence, it was a big ha, to Karen. The bulldozer couldn't touch this one. Word got around fast. People started coming by my house, just to say hi. Mr. Thompson brought me a whole plate of cookies, oatmeal this time. "You're a good kid, Jake," he said. Mrs. Lee stopped by with her little dog, who barked at my new fence like it was a giant toy. "I love it," she said. "Karen would hate this color." We both laughed. Even Sam, the guy with the blue curtains, came over. "You're the best, Jake," he said. "No more curtain rules." He gave me a high five. It was awesome, everyone was happy, and they weren't scared of fines anymore. The neighborhood started to change after that. People parked their cars wherever they wanted. Kids left their bikes on the grass. Mr. Thompson put up a new birdhouse, bright yellow this time, and nobody complained. It felt like everyone could breathe again. They'd wave at me when I sat on my porch, sipping lemonade. "Hey, Jake," they'd call. I'd wave back, feeling good. I was still the same quiet Jake, but now they looked at me different, like I was someone who mattered. And Karen? She couldn't handle it. About a month later, we heard she was moving away. Yep, she packed up her stuff and left. I saw a big truck outside her house one day, with boxes piled high. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even her friends. I guess she couldn't stand not being in charge. She'd spent years telling everyone what to do, and now she had nothing to say. Someone said she moved to a big city far away, probably to boss someone else. Good luck to them, right? We didn't miss her one bit. After she was gone, I kept living my life. My truck was still rusty, my house was still small, but I didn't care. I'd sit on my porch with my tall blue fence behind me, watching the sunset. The neighborhood was peaceful now, no more bulldozers, no more yelling. Kids played in the street, and dogs barked at squirrels. It was ours again, and that's what mattered. I thought about everything that happened, Karen's mean words, the smashed fence, the big meeting. It was a wild ride. But I stayed calm through it all, waiting for my moment. And when it came, I showed everyone the truth. Karen thought she could push me around, but she didn't know who I really was. Now she did, and so did everyone else. I didn't need to yell or fight, I just needed my deed and a little patience. And it worked. So that's how it ended, friends. Justice was served, like a big plate of cookies for everyone. Karen lost her power, and we got our neighborhood back. I stayed the same old Jake, just a quiet guy with a rusty truck. But now, when people walked by, they'd smile and wave. I'd earned a little more respect, and that felt better than anything. Okay, friends, we've reached the end of my story. It was a wild ride, right? Karen thought she was the big boss, yelling and smashing my fence, but I turned it all around. I stayed quiet, kept my secret, and won in the end. So, here's the thing I want you to remember: sometimes the person who yells the loudest doesn't have the most power. They might act big and tough, but that doesn't mean they're strong. And the one who stays quiet, like me? They might be holding all the cards, waiting for the perfect moment to surprise everyone. Think about it. Karen looked at me and saw a nobody, just a guy with a rusty truck and a small house. She judged me by what she saw on the outside. But the real story? It was way deeper than that. I had a deed, a secret, and a plan. She didn't know who I really was until it was too late. So here's a little lesson: don't judge people just by how they look or act. You never know what they're hiding, like a big surprise that changes everything. Life's funny that way. Sometimes the loudest kid in class isn't the smartest. Sometimes the quiet one in the back has the best ideas. Maybe you've seen this happen too. Ever had someone act mean or bossy, thinking they could push you around? I bet some of you have your own Karen stories. Like that time someone told you what to do, but you proved them wrong in the end. It feels good when that happens, doesn't it? When the bully doesn't win, and the good guy comes out on top. That's what I want you to take away from this. Be patient, be smart, and don't let the loud ones scare you. You've got your own power inside, you just have to wait for the right time to use it. I didn't fight Karen with yelling or fists. I fought her with my brain and a little piece of paper. And look what happened, she's gone, and I'm still here, sipping lemonade by my tall blue fence. So, what do you think, friends? Have you ever had a Karen in your life who got what was coming to them? Maybe a bossy kid at school or a grumpy neighbor. Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and I love hearing your stories. And if you like this tale, give it a big thumbs up. It tells me you had fun, and that makes me happy. Stick around too, there's more cool stories coming your way. You're awesome, and don't forget, the quiet ones can be the strongest. Keep being you, and who knows? Maybe you've got a secret up your sleeve too.